Good evening. Want to grab everybody's attention here so we can get started here tonight. Want to thank all you guys for braving the weather out there. Thankfully the roads are a little better tonight than they were last night, so that helps a whole lot. Just welcome to the Heartland Institute. Glad everybody could come. For some of you that may be new, if you don't know about the Heartland Institute, we've been around since 1984. And we've been covering lots of issues. Our main focus right now is healthcare, environment and climate, budget and tax, and school reform. And as some of you already know, if you saw the yellow scarves up front, it's National School Choice Week this week as well. And I want to give a quick shout out to Rochelle Crawford at AFP and Carol Davis from the Illinois Conservative Union. We've been planning several events. You'll see a flyer for one of them in the back. So there's some more events, especially for the people online too if you're not here. But tomorrow night we're having an event in Elgin at Elgin Community College in Building E. And we're going to talk about school safety and how that relates to school choice tomorrow night. And Representative Alan Skillicorn will be there for that event. On Friday, we actually have two events because our other event today got canceled. But we're going out to Rockford with Representative Joe Sosnowski at 11 o'clock at Rockford Christian School. So anybody out in Rockford, come on Thursday at 11 o'clock for that event. We're going to talk a lot about the Invest in Kids Act. So one of the few schools, can't talk today. One of the few school choice options we do have in Illinois. And I think it's about 5,500 kids were able to take advantage of that scholarship in year one of it. So in year two, the applications just started, actually on the 15th. So we'll see how the applications are going and what numbers we're seeing now and see where Governor Pritzker goes on that. During his campaign, he was really, really adamant against school choice. It looks like he may have softened his stance a little bit. So we'll kind of have to wait and see where he goes on that. But kids need choices. Couple things. I know y'all got food back here. If you in the table on the back, there's a lot of Heartland materials. Every bit of that is free for you to take. So if there's something you see, pick it up. Copies of our newspapers back there. We send through, actually right now we're doing 3 newspapers. Our school reform news is on hiatus, but our other 3 newspapers are going to every elected official in the country every single month. So once a week, they're getting a policy-oriented news from the Heartland Institute. So, and we have, it's really, really amazing. On the front of the papers, you'll see the statistics on how many people actually still read those papers, how many people use those papers. It's about 1/3 of the legislators actually use something in our newspapers to inform their policy. In fact, our email list this last year had over 58% of all legislators in the country opened at least one of our emails during 2018. So we're still having a great impact and stuff and on everything like that. Over here, actually, we have extra books that are $1 a piece. If there's a book over there you want, it's only $1. Behind that, you'll see our library, and that's where our extra books came from. We only keep but so many copies of a book. But our library now has over 18,000 volumes. So we're preserving books and keeping them going. And we had a generous donor, Michael Perry Mazur, actually allowed us to use his name and name the library after him. You are welcome to come in here every day when we're working and actually read the books. We don't allow checkout, but you can come look. You can look on our website and get a list of all our books, and we're actually part of the Illinois Library Association, so you can actually see all of our books here, find out what's there, something you're looking for, something you may not be able to find online. We may have it here. So a little bit more about National School Choice Week. There's over 40,000 events this year for National School Choice Week. In Illinois, there's almost 1,100 events. Of course, we're doing several in the next few days. Just want to make sure y'all know about that. As like I said, Elgin, then Rockford Christian School on Friday, and Friday evening we'll be at Christian Liberty Academy, just on the other side of Arlington Heights, where we'll be talking about the myths and messaging of school choice. You can find out what the talking points are from the teachers' unions and the opponents of school choice and how to message to other people on effectively to be able to try to get more school choice, because obviously more parents want school choice. Every poll says that. So now I know you don't want to hear me all night, so we're going to introduce Adam Andrzejewski. I've known Adam for a little over a decade now, so he's helped me a lot when I was doing some transparency work in school districts, holding them accountable. His work with Open the Books has really made a lot of research. He has found over 10,000 teachers and superintendents who are now making over $100,000 in retirement. The system is unsustainable. And looking further at his numbers, there's teachers that will pay in $300,000 into their retirement plan. They retire, they will become pension millionaires. They will exceed $1 million in payouts. That's unsustainable the way this works. And just recently, I know you had an article in Forbes where 30,000 educators are making, working or retired, are making over $100,000. That means that retirement system is going to be paying out more and more and more. That just alone right now is costing Illinois taxpayers over $3.7 billion every single year. So the work that Adam's doing is great, not just on school districts and holding them accountable, but on all taxing bodies, and not just in Illinois, but around the entire country. So let's welcome Adam Andrzejewski to the stage.
But it's great to be here this evening. Lenny, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It is a real distinct privilege to share our mission and vision with each and every one of you today on such a cold night. Thank you for coming out here to Heartland to be here with us this evening. I want to give a special thank you to the new president of Heartland, Tim Hulskamp. Tim told me a story in the back. He's courageous. When he was in Congress, he told John Boehner at a critical moment, "I don't work for you." Let's give Tim a big round of applause. And let's recognize the very substantial and robust legacy of Joe Bast as we gather here at Heartland here this evening. Let's give a big round of applause for the Basts. We've got some key people here in the room from openthebooks.com. We have our board treasurer, Hillary Till, that joins us. Our board member, Jameson Campaign. And the folks that run our social media, communications, and oversight, they join us over here. That's Jesse Fox, Madeline Strumpf, and Lauren Renslow. It's a big team, and every single one of us plays a big role in this. I just want to start out by talking to you this evening about the concept of transparency, why we feel the open government movement is revolutionizing United States public policy and politics. Think about the fundamental underpinnings of the country. In America, for the first time in 5,000 years, our founders recognized that our rights don't come from government, they come from God. The citizen in America is sovereign. The concept of transparency properly orders the American experiment. In the words of Ronald Reagan in his farewell address, he laid out the analogy. Reagan said his administration was successful because they empowered people. He said government is the car and the citizen is the driver. And we are supposed to be able to tell that car how fast to go, when to turn, and when to stop. And that is why our founders recognized that knowledge is power. It's why our founders wrote transparency into the United States Constitution. And it's Article 1, Section 9, and it says that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. And we believe today in the internet age, in the age of big data, there's a clear interpretation. Post every dime online in real time, open the books. We have found over the years that if a public body resists transparency, yes, they have something to hide. I remember struggling to get 10 years worth of checkbook data out of the city of Chicago, the Rahm Emanuel administration. When he was running for re-election 4 years later, we were able to mash up the city of Chicago checkbook with his campaign disclosures, and this is what we found. We found 600 city vendors gave Rahm Emanuel $7 million of campaign cash, and those vendors had received, through the Daley years, through the first 4 years of the Emanuel administration, $2 billion. I remember struggling for the first time ever back in 2011 to open the books on the pay and pensions of virtually every single public employee in Illinois at every level of government for the first time ever. And when we published that file for the first time, we quickly found a school district treasurer in Lyons Township who 1 year made $163,000 and the very next year made $296,000. But that's in Cook County, and the prosecutor there cannot historically find public corruption anywhere. But the people carried that forward. They raised their voice, and eventually that treasurer was indicted, he pled guilty, and he serves 8 years in the penitentiary. I remember the struggle to open the books on the College of DuPage in 2014. When our team of auditors identified $100 million that was hidden in a special type of impressed accounting, petty cash accounting that even the feds have outlawed since the year 1999. And that's the accounting COD was using when they said that they were transparent with every dime of checkbook spending. So what can you hide in $100 million of spending over 7 years? Well, now we know they spent millions of dollars on an upscale French restaurant. They hired a French sommelier, and they put together a world-class wine cellar. Our team of auditors found that their chief radio station engineer, unbeknownst to the college accountants, had opened up his own company and traded with his own company on this insider deal to the tune of $500,000. When we exposed that, and pushed that to the Chicago Tribune, and they wrote 2 front-page news articles, that radio station engineer was eventually indicted by the DuPage County prosecutor. He pled guilty. He was sentenced to 9 years with restitution of $400,000, and he tried to go retired, and he has lost his pension. We believe the open government movement is revolutionizing United States public policy and politics. And this concept has been with us in America since the founding. I mean, think about Ben Franklin when he left the Constitutional Convention and he was asked, "Mr. Franklin, what do we have here?" And he said, "A republic if you can keep it." The American experiment is premised on individuals, on citizens, on you and I, to hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. So our mission at openthebooks.com is to open the books and audit them. And we've had a lot of success at capturing public data. As a matter of fact, we've built the world's largest private database of public sector expenditures. Here's what that means. We've captured 5 billion individual government expenditures, nearly all federal spending since the year 2000, 48 out of 50 state checkbooks, and in 60,000 local units of government across the country, we've captured salary records and pension records where we can get them. Our honorary chairman is former U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn. And we could not have a better honorary chairman. Think of Coburn's leadership in the United States Senate in 2004. I mean, Coburn's a small state U.S. Senator from Oklahoma. And as a freshman, he stands in the well of the Senate, and he takes on Republican leadership Ted Stevens, the legendary boss from Alaska, on the bridge to nowhere, a $300 million earmark for a bridge that went from mainland Alaska to an island that served less than 100 people. That was embarrassing for Republican leadership. Coburn eventually won that fight, used that as a halo example amongst other people joining that team to end earmarks as we know it. He knew he would be retaliated against, and he was. The Republicans in the Senate stripped him of his ability to practice medicine. Coburn delivered babies, 3,000 of them, back in his small town in Oklahoma. It takes courage to lead on behalf of the American people. At openthebooks.com, we're carrying forward the Coburn model. See, Coburn had reached across the aisle with then Illinois Senator Barack Obama. In 2006, they did the Google Government Act that opened the federal checkbook to public scrutiny for the first time ever. So they exposed the line-by-line transactions, which makes our federal work today possible. What Coburn couldn't stop using the Senate rules, he stopped 1,000 pork barrel expenditure bills from passing. He would embarrass his colleagues because he published their waste in his annual waste box report, his waste book report. So think about this. A small state senator from 2004, by the time 2013 rolls around, he's on the Time magazine 100 most influential persons in the world list because he practiced the principles that come from the founding. He practiced transparency, he had courage, he opened the books, he audited those books, and he held his colleagues accountable. And so we are privileged to fight in the same trench with Dr. Coburn. We've got two substantial initiatives at openthebooks.com going on right now. In December, we launched, for the first time in history, virtually every single public employee's salary from every public body across the entire country. And we display those salaries right on our website at openthebooks.com. It's probably 9 out of every 10 public employees at every level in this country that we captured their salary record. So when and where we have it, we have their name, we have their position, who they work for, and how much they make. And you can see it all. So when we opened those books across the entire country, how did we do it? It took an amazing amount of work. It was $1 million effort. It was 60,000 Freedom of Information Act requests. We literally built the Freedom of Information Act machine to capture this data. We use the latest in technologies to file the requests, follow up on the requests, answer the questions from the public body, receive the production, break it open, which is always a task, map it, and upload it onto our website, into our interactive maps, and right to the palm of your hand with your mobile device, your cell phone. If you haven't downloaded our it's free for Apple and Android. It's our app called Open the Books. You'll be shocked and amazed at what's going on in your own zip code, in your own backyard. Here in Illinois, there are 94,000 public employees, either currently on a six-figure $100,000 salary or retired on a six-figure public pension. There's 20,000 of them in Chicago. There's 30,000 of them in Illinois K through 12 education. There's 11,000 of them at the state level and another 15,000 of them within Illinois higher education. As Illinois higher education enrollments have dropped, the pay and cash compensation of professors has outpaced inflation. Across the country, we've identified that these 19 million public employees every year on cash compensation clean off $1 trillion. 1.7 million of them make $100,000 or more. and 170,000 of them out-earn every governor of the 50 states at a threshold salary of $190,000 per year. There is a disconnect between public employee levels of pay, their perquisites, and their pension benefits versus all the rest of us in the private sector. Let me explain what I mean. Last year at this time, we mapped the swamp the president inherited. The last year of the Obama administration in 2016. It's a study of the administrative state. And here's what we found. We found it's very expensive. It's $1 million a minute. It's $500 million. It's $500 million a day. There are 30,000 federal bureaucrats that out-earn every governor of the 50 states. But it's not only about the salaries of federal bureaucrats. They also get bonuses. Last year, 1 million federal bureaucrats got a bonus. The total bonus bucket was over $1 billion. And most people don't understand how 1 million federal workers can get a performance bonus. You don't probably think government's running that well. So we took a look at a Government Accountability Office audit that looked at all the ratings of the federal workers. And 99.7% are rated highly successful. That's how they get bonuses. There are more highly successful bureaucrats than the advertised purity of Ivory soap. So it's salaries, it's bonuses, but it's also other benefits like paid time off. The average federal bureaucrat gets 43 days of paid time off. Now, I don't know who in the room gets 43 days. At openthebooks.com, we don't. It's 10 holidays, 13 sick days, and 20 vacation days for the average federal worker. And we estimate that benefit costs the American taxpayer around $20 billion a year because you have to hire more workers because people get 8.5 weeks of paid time off. And this isn't France. Here's the other significant project that we're working on right now at openthebooks.com. And you saw a lot of this last fall, and you're going to see more of it shortly. In the nation's leading newspapers, we've written 2 letters to President Donald Trump urging him to wage, as commander-in-chief, to wage war on waste, to embrace the transparency revolution. So at the Wall Street Journal, at USA Today, we ran these open letters right alongside the second page on the spread pages was 100 examples of outrageous taxpayer abuse. We asked the president to wage this war on waste with a 3-pronged strategy. First prong is leaders have to lead to open the White House expenditures to transparency and to cut 10% of his own budget. He has already cut 20% of his headcount payroll at the White House versus the Obama administration. The White House payroll, they are doing more with less. And even on a first year to the second year comparison, Trump honed his payroll even further and cut 3 additional employees from his payroll for an additional savings of $500,000. He's leading by example. Prong 2, we encouraged on September 24th the president to order his agency secretaries, his cabinet secretaries, to cut 5% of their budgets on waste, duplication, corruption, and other misspending. 29 days after our advertisement ran at the Wall Street Journal, the president called that press conference and issued that order. You probably saw those newspaper headlines. And I have been told that our ads were placed on the Oval Office desk and helped galvanize the president's policy against other policy experts at the White House who wanted a 1% cut, and the president came out with a 5% cut. We demonstrated that it's a target-rich environment. For instance, if you're an Ivy League college, in a 6-year period, the 8 schools of the Ivy League on federal grants and direct payments took $22 billion from federal agencies. This is despite the fact they have $120 billion in their private sector donor-funded endowments. They don't need our money, but they want our money, and they can get our money, and they took $22 billion over the course of a 6-year period. We did a study that they could fund it all out of their endowment. For instance, they could give free tuition to their entire student body with no additional gifts into their endowment for the next 51 years. We took a look at the last week of the fiscal year on use it or lose it spending, when $50 billion of federal contracting went out the door in the last week. It was 1 out of every $9 spent the whole year went out the door in the last week of the year, $50 billion. They spent down their budgets so they could get the same appropriation or higher next year. For instance, they bought $170 million worth of cars that last week. They bought $110 million worth of advertising services from some of the biggest Madison Avenue advertising companies in the world. That's spin. That's using your tax dollars to convince taxpayers to send federal agencies more taxpayer money. All of this should have upset the president. $6.2 million was purchased CrossFit gym equipment with special jump ropes that specifically mandated the signature from the founder of CrossFit. They bought fidget spinners and paddle boards and shuffle boards. We've studied we've given scrutiny to federal grant making. The $600 billion every single year that goes out the door on grants, which are subsidies, which are giveaways. We've determined that there's nearly a grant for everybody. For instance, if you are a child in China and want to learn how to cross your busy street, the American taxpayer paid $180,000 to create a mobile app to teach Chinese children how to cross their streets. $600,000 went to a senior center outside of Boston to teach the seniors Tai Chi. NASA, the space agency, spent $1 million to prepare the nation's religions for the discovery of extraterrestrial life. HHS, Health and Human Services, spent $1.1 million on a study where it hurts the most to be stung by a bee. Everywhere. $1.4 million went to teach sex education to California prostitutes who could probably teach the class. NASA spent another $2.5 million on a children's animated cartoon called Space Racers. That's off mission. $9.2 million went to the Shishi Airport on Martha's Vineyard. That's where the Hollywood elites fly into and the East Coast money elites. It's a target-rich environment. $1.4 trillion since 2003. The federal government admits was paid out on improper, mistaken payments. That's 2 full years worth of Department of Defense expenditures that the feds say, because of a lack of internal accounting control, because of material weaknesses in their accounting systems, they overpaid $1.4 trillion. We have no idea where our tax dollars are going. At the Department of Education, just in the past 2 fiscal years, $11 billion of mistaken and improper payments have flowed. At the Department at the United States Agriculture Department on farm subsidies, nearly $5 billion of overpayments to farmers have flowed out the door. Our honorary chairman, Dr. Tom Coburn, when he was wrapping up his time a few years ago in the United States Senate, he told the following story. He said, America right now, we face a 3-minute moment. We're $21 trillion in debt, and we're adding $1 trillion now, we know, in real time every single year. We need a war on waste. We need a transparency revolution. Coburn said, this is America's 3-minute moment. And here's the story he told. He delivered about 3,000 babies back in Oklahoma. And he said, on the law of large numbers, every once in a while, one of the deliveries would get into trouble. And you knew it was a troubled delivery. Baby's heartbeat, which was normally 140 to 150 beats a minute, the heartbeat would drop to 50 and 60 beats a minute. Coburn said that was your 3-minute moment. As the physician, you had to make a decision. You either went for the forceps to pull the baby out, you went for the vacuum extractor, you could make the decision to wheel the mother from labor and delivery over to surgery and do a C-section. Coburn said you had to make a decision, and you had 3 minutes to save the life of the baby and to save the life of the mother. Coburn said, this right now is America's 3-minute moment. On fiscal issues, we the people, need to start driving that car. We need to tell our elected leaders how fast to go, turn, and when to stop. Join us. Go to openthebooks.com, see the spending, ask questions, demand answers, and together, let's hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. Thank you, and I'm open for questions.
I'm going to come up front here to be able to answer questions. We have Lindsay and Billy will be coming around. So raise your hands, make sure I see you, and we'll point back and forth. We'll try to go back and forth across the room.
Ma'am, I got you. I'm going to stand over here.
Well, you can hear me anyway, but they won't hear me on camera. That's the only thing, but you'll be able to hear me anyway. So, whoa. For those of you online, you remember, you can ask questions too. So please write your questions down either on YouTube or Facebook, whichever one you're watching on. And the guys in our tech booth will be also watching that and give us those questions as well. So we're going to start over here. The first question right over here. Lindsay will come and show you the microphone, hand it right in front of you to be able to do it. We are filming, so the camera's got to turn around. That's what Lindsay's waiting for. Over there, Andy, all the way on the other side. There we go.
Hi, Adam. You mentioned that 48 of the 50 states you'd gotten data from. What are the 2 that you couldn't get?
So we've had a recent success on this. The 2 we still don't have are California and North Carolina. So go figure on California. And it's interesting. Both states are giving us the same excuse, which we think is just absolutely not credible. But they're both constitutional officers that are required to attest that when they cut checks, there is no fraud in those checks. They sign an attestation, an affidavit, every time they cut checks. Those are the very constitutional officers saying that they don't hold the checkbook. They're cutting the checks. They're swearing to the payments. They're auditing that checkbook, and they are saying that they can't turn over a responsive record. We think it's wrong, but they're testing our will and wallet, and so far we haven't sued them. I'll tell you a story of who we have sued, and it's in the state of Wyoming. So Wyoming, starting in 2014, so we're now working on our 6th year in the state of Wyoming trying to secure a basic copy of the state checkbook. Who by name was paid by which agency, how much for what service. It's called the checkbook. You're familiar with it at home and in your business. They, for 6 years, have said they can't produce that record. So last year we sued them. We sued the state auditor. Now let's put this in perspective. Twice she had won for state auditor with 99% of the vote. This is a powerful politician. I mean, Vladimir Putin in Russia, he wins with less of a percentage than the state auditor of Wyoming at 99%. She didn't run in November after we got serious on the state checkbook and made transparency the number one public policy issue in the state. Last week, for the first time ever, the books were open in Wyoming. We published 2 full years on our website of state expenditures.
Here and here, make sure you raise your hand, wait till the microphone gets to you. It sounds like mine's doing some of the feedback, so mine's off right now, but I know you guys can still hear me.
I'm very loud. I'm gonna.
We're going to come right here, then we'll come right there.
Yeah, Adam, given the amount of the federal corruption and so forth, who deserves, if you, to the best of your knowledge, who deserves the credit for coming up with passing the Freedom of Information Act in the first place?
So this was back the Freedom of Information Act. So let's break this down. So in America, the citizen is sovereign, and what that means is that you own the government public expenditure records. The citizens already own that. We were taxed. They spent our tax dollars. The tax is an infringement, and necessarily so, on our freedom and liberties. We spend less time with our families. We spend more time at work to pay our tax bill. And since we're sovereign, since we're the owners, we get to see how they spent it. And the Freedom of Information Act statute is a statutory mechanism of how we, the people, take possession of records we already own. So this was, a lot of these laws, these public integrity laws, as they were called, were passed in the early 1970s after Richard Nixon ran into all of those problems. So that was kind of the impetus for the modern day Freedom of Information Act laws. Now, they're very, very powerful. Just here in Illinois this fall, at openthebooks.com, we partnered with Fox 32 News in Chicago. And I want to walk you through some of our discoveries, because they've led to some pretty incredible impacts. We investigated, in 2016, the number one highest salary in Illinois K-12 education was Joyce Carmine in Park Forest. She made nearly $400,000. She then retired on nearly a $300,000 a year pension. She was then rehired, same position, same school district, on a consulting contract of $1,200 a day. So now she gets her $300,000 a year pension, and she gets her consulting contract. In Ford Heights, Gregory Jackson, he makes about $365,000 a year in one of the poorest school districts in the entire country. 94% of the children are at or near the federal poverty markers. He's already accumulated, he's only been on the job, I think, for about 8 years. He's already accumulated 501 unused sick and vacation days, which we estimate is approximately a $600,000 unused bank value. His 5-year contract, we estimated total cost to taxpayers will be $2.8 million. That's how much salary and perquisites and pension benefits are baked into these contracts that these boards are giving away, even in Ford Heights where there isn't any money. We found a small superintendent, a small district near Joliet, Frankfort, Union School District. The superintendent makes $206,000. The district has 99 students and 11 teachers. We found that roughly 1 out of every 4 payroll dollars flows right into the superintendent's own pocket. The biggest story that we uncovered is we investigated the number one all-time highest salary in Illinois K-12 education. This guy was making $407,000 of cash compensation over in Calumet City. No high school in the district, 1,100 kids. He was going to retire on Halloween. We filed a Freedom of Information Act request wanting to know how much unused sick and vacation time he had in his bank account. And he disclosed 567 days, and we valued that. We thought he was going to ask his board for $750,000 on a final cash check out the door before he claimed his massive, probably $300,000 a year pension. Here's what we didn't know. Dane Placco, the Fox reporter, goes to the board meeting. He presents our findings. And we thought our findings were egregious. The school board members started looking at each other. They had their board attorney investigate. This superintendent was actually asking the board for a final cash check out the door of $1.73 million. They fired him. And that's the power of the Freedom of Information Act.
Question right here in the front.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, when Daley got out of office, and he took another insignificant job after that for a very short period of time, then he got 2 pensions, is that correct?
Well, so last spring, in about April, we took a look at former Illinois legislators and governors reaping massive public sector pensions. And Daley was on that list. I forget all the detail on Daley, but I do believe he gets at least 2 pensions, one as a state legislator and then one as mayor of Chicago. Now, maybe both of those were combined and there was a sweetener factor that went into it, but Daley is receiving a massive pension. If you just Google Mayor Daley's pension, Forbes, my article would pop up and you can see the actual details.
I wanted to call Durbin and tell him to pay for your own.
So you do raise a good point, and this former governor, Republican, his name's been in the press lately because he's on J.B. Pritzker's transition team, and his name is former Governor Jim Edgar. So we've taken a look and done some analysis on the pensions he receives and the compensation he receives. So Edgar gets a governor's pension, and I'm just going on memory, it's around $180,000 a year for his 20 years of public service as a state rep and as governor of Illinois. He then went to work for the University of Illinois at Champaign, and he retired there. I think it was after 20 years, and he gets a second pension from the U of I of around $80,000 a year. And then he's hired back through the U of I Foundation part-time, because you can't work full-time and claim a pension, for about another $60,000 a year. So if you add all of this up, I think, the numbers that I just said aren't going to add up, but it's around, he cleans off every single year right now around $340,000 a year through all of these different public sources of his income. And why isn't that in the press when he's talking and lauding the new governor of Illinois?
So first of all, thanks for coming out here to speak with us tonight. Do you envision a scenario in which, like maybe 5-10 years from now, the U.S. runs into a recession and isn't able to make the interest payments on our $21 trillion deficit or debt right now? And do you think that its status as the world's premier currency?
So I just listened to remarks by economist Stephen Moore on this very topic, and Moore is actually not concerned about the federal debt to the extent that, for instance, the team that opened the books and our Honorary Chairman Dr. Tom Coburn is concerned about the debt. And Moore is a board advisor to us. We take his opinion, we give it a lot of weight. So there's different opinions on this. But here's what I want to paint the picture of. So you've got $21 trillion of federal debt. What that means for every man, woman, and child in this entire country, it's $65,000 for each of us. A family of 4, that means your share in your household of the national debt is $260,000. So is that ever being paid back? But let's continue it further. Here in the state of Illinois, just our 5 statewide pension systems Moody's tells us they're about $120 billion in the red. If you take a look at all the pension systems in Illinois, they're $250 billion underfunded. There's only 13 million people here in the state. So that means roughly each one of us for our long-term pension liabilities owes about 20 grand. Then in DuPage County, you have 327 local units of government that have also racked up $3 billion in what used to be rock-ribbed Republican DuPage County, $3 billion of long-term liabilities, of long-term bonded debt in our municipal units of government in DuPage County. You start adding all of these things up, and I can tell you, nobody has a plan to pay it back.
Going down front, Carl.
Some years ago, I asked a question about FOIAs, because each FOIA had a certain few $1,000s connected to it. And I asked how much the legal expense was that. And the lawyer who was part of the board, I could see him flinch. The next time FOIAs came out, there was no dollar amount connected anymore. I realized lawyers were making crazy money taking care of how to answer a FOIA. So I decided never to ask for a FOIA myself personally. I would hold some board member who I knew quite well to do it, to make sure I got it without any legal expenses.
Well, Carl Lambert in Highland Park has held his public bodies accountable, and every time he goes to a public meeting, and this is instructive for all of us, that public meeting, that room is a lot better. They make better decisions because Carl's watching. Thank you, Carl.
Okay, we have an online question for you here. Have you provided Illinois public employee pension data to the new governor and other politicians?
So it's available for everybody on our website at openthebook.com, and we've written frequently about it using the Forbes platform, and it's quite frankly available right on your cell phone. I don't think there's any secrets here. The information is pretty well distributed. So in fact, I just want to cover some of this across the entire country. So if you're in LA County, there are 44 lifeguards that make between $200,000 and $365,000 a year, and they get a sunscreen allowance on top of it. If you're watching in New York City, New York, you've got 24 New York City plumbers that last year each made in excess of 200 grand in overtime on top of their salaries. In New York City, you have school janitors out earning the school principals. If you are in Texas, we just did a piece at Forbes. It was national news on Cumulus broadcast radio stations, a news segment across the country. The Houston Chronicle picked up great coverage on this. I wrote about this at Forbes. In Houston, at the local level, the top city manager last year cleaned off $650,000. You've got assistant city administrators making $250,000. You have 18,000 local, municipal, library, park district, managers of the swimming pools, counties in Texas, 18,000 six-figure public employees costing Texas taxpayers $2.1 billion. 1,900 of those local employees make more than Texas Governor Greg Abbott at 150 grand. In Florida, you've got a city attorney in this small town. It's about 30,000 people in Dana Beach. He's out-earned every president ever of the United States. Last year, he made over $427,000. And obviously in Illinois, our problems are legendary.
So next question is going to be George, then we have Dan, and then Robert right here. And I know there's some more of you. We still have plenty of time for questions. So
there's all kinds of waste to be concerned with. But I was interested in you saying 1.4 trillion over 10 years was sort of wasted. Yesterday I came across this article by Veronique de Rougy about the latest report, and the title of her article is How 137 Billion Strangely Disappears. And that's the total of the government's report, which identifies the what disappears by department, around 36 billion from Medicare, 36 billion from Medicaid and various other programs. What I'm wondering, though, you're saying a target-rich environment. It seems that these areas specifically would be even more target-rich. Is there any way that your Open the Books can get into this area?
So, Veronica DeRuggi, she's probably citing these improper payments. I haven't seen her story, but last fall, we led at the Wall Street Journal on our 100 examples of outrageous taxpayer abuse with the improper payments. And on that list, we also broke it down by agency. Look, I think more needs to be done on it. Not enough, if you took a poll, the average 1,000 Americans, probably nobody would even know that this is a problem. And it's just money flying out the door. And this is actually an area that can and should immediately be tightened up.
Okay. Dan, then Robert, and I see a bunch more of you. We'll get there. Go ahead. Robert's right here.
First of all, thank you very much for the wonderful work you're doing. My God, I didn't realize it was so bad. It's a prodigious amount of output that you've got. This analogy that comes to mind. I go in my kitchen to turn the faucet on expecting a drip, and I got Niagara Falls in the kitchen washing away my house. It's just amazing. But I'm interested in, with all this information out of wrongdoing, what I would characterize as wrongdoing, are there other organizations using your information? I'm thinking of class actions. I'm thinking of taxpayer rights suits. I'm thinking, what is the remedy? You've told us about superintendents that's been held with feet to their fire, but it's one or two people here and there and there. We need to hold a massive number of people to accountability.
So we have a platform to partner with organizations, and first we'd like to partner with 25, and then 50, then 100, and then 250 organizations left, right, and center around the entire country. We just have the philosophy that hard data in the public debate makes the entire debate more substantial, more robust. You get to better policy if you're actually talking about hard data. Why do we think that? Because in the private sector, think about it. You never make one single solitary decision without the hard data. But government is making it all day long, and the people are being walled off from the decisions they're making. We want to change that dynamic. So there's a report coming out on federal grants to nonprofit organizations from around the country. The Capital Research Center in Washington, D.C. used our data. They cite us in the report throughout the entire report as they've done this oversight study. Our Fox 32 investigation of Illinois supersized salaries that led to such great impacts. We're using this as a beta test example to take it to other mainstream media outlets around the country. The New York plumbers and school janitors piece, we partnered with the New York Post on that story to publish that. We partnered with the Houston Chronicle to showcase all of the public employees' supersized salaries in the Houston suburbs just recently, where they did over the holidays a 22-slide analysis of those salaries. So these are just a few of the examples of where we're reaching out to and creating strong relationships with both media and watchdog organizations to place our data in areas where people can make an impact.
Robert, coming over here to you, then to Michael.
Okay. Yeah. Question for you. Does Open the Books take a look at the campaign financing? I'm curious to see who's contributing to these elected officials and if they're voting in the interest of their big donors, not the citizenry that they're supposed to represent.
So the question is on campaign cash. Where we have crossed our data and mashed it up with these campaign cash disclosure databases was in the city of Chicago with Rahm Emanuel, and I told that story. But also in Oregon, like with the governor of Oregon. So the governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, she was Secretary of State, governor. We took, I believe it was 5 years of her campaign cash disclosures and mashed it up with the state checkbook over a similar period of time. And we found something like 650 state vendors gave her campaign somewhere around $3 million of campaign cash, and they had reaped around $105 billion worth of state payments. That was big news in the state of Oregon. And we want to study the longest serving governors in the nation and do the same analysis whether they're Republicans or Democrats. I think it's very material that voters and citizens know if there is a concerted effort to solicit state vendors for campaign cash, because that cements political incumbency.
Hi, I live in District 86, School District 86. And we're fighting for the third time, as you might know, because you live there too, the referendum with the school board. And, you know, there are several groups of us who are fighting this, and it's not just one group. They have branched off. But how do we get to people from who are voting yes? I mean, twice we voted this down. And now they're asking for another $166 million for 2 high schools, which they already get $72 million a year to run. And now they want an $166 million. What advice can you give us to help defeat this? I assume you would think that this should be defeated. But I shouldn't say that, but I don't.
The answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Because it's a bloated bond issue. I think in the last go-around for the November election, they wanted $40 million to upgrade the pool. I don't care if it was 2, but I think it was 1. So to kind of flesh that out, you know, on my own home, if that was voted up on that bloated bond issue for $166 million, including the $40 million earmarked for the pool, that would cost me $1,000 a year for the next 30 years. So this is very material. It's a pocketbook issue, and I think that the citizens in Hinsdale and surrounding communities understand the school probably needs some renovation. Does it need $166 million and a $40 million pool worth of renovation? The answer to that is no. But are they modifying? Is the school board, after 2 attempts, are they modifying the proposal? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're doubling down on coercion. So they announced, and it was big news in all the Chicago press, that they were going to cancel football and swimming and cheerleading. You see, they aren't persuading us. They're bringing the heat to us. They're coercing us for their big bloated bond issue. So there's a lot of work to do here.
Andrew, the thing that blows me away is that when you talk about these big numbers of money, that's all of a sudden it's going away. Nobody knows where it's going. You know, every one of these organizations are in the government all have to have somebody that's in charge. And you mentioned something about some kind of an affidavit that these gentlemen have to, or ladies have to sign, that they're responsible for what their people, what they spend. And this is ridiculous that we're just wasting money left and right. It's got to come to an end. And is there a way that you can put more pressure on these people that are head of these different agencies, that they have to be more responsible and keep track of the money that's in other words, if they have a budget for say $40 million and they can only count for $20 billion, well, you know, where did the other $20 billion go? Somebody's got to answer these questions. That's what you're trying to do.
So Reagan said, if you can't make them see the light, make them feel the heat. It's up to us to make the elected officials feel the heat. And that's the only way to get behavior change. For example, you probably can't remember the last time where a local state's attorney indicted anybody for public corruption. It's very rare. That's why the stories I told you, that came after the citizens raised their voice, brought the heat, so finally the prosecutors saw the light. I told you about the College of DuPage radio station engineer in DuPage County who was finally indicted by the state's attorney. It took him a year. And finally, after the second Chicago Tribune front page news story, he finally indicted the engineer. He had the information for over a year. That's right. That shows you that you and I, we're not engaged enough. Because those state's attorneys are political animals and they are not going to rock the boat on their own. Only when it becomes a voting issue at the ballot box are our public officials, are our prosecutors going to get serious about public corruption.
Okay, Billy, right here first, then I know we have an online question back after that, and then we'll have some more questions up here. I think we're getting to the point we have like 6 more people, I think, with questions. So let's get through those, and then we'll see how fast we go to see if we have more time for anybody else. So jump on right back here. The next one over. Actually, sorry. There's a blue shirt right there.
I'm sorry, she's Bill.
Oh, you're
I'll ask his follow-up.
I was wondering if you had any figures on how much money we lose towards phony disability claims. I've got knowledge of actually a very small state agency where over the years I've seen 3 or 4 people go on disability for minor things and they disappear in the ether and nobody ever tries to check up on them. And if this is happening in a small agency, I'm wondering if you have any kind of handle on what kind of money that's costing the state.
So in 2010, when I ran for governor, I ran on the concept of not only open the books, but a forensic audit to follow the money on the books. And the political class in Illinois screamed, it will cost too much. Well, see, not in Illinois. Looked at Medicaid payments going out the door on fraudulent payments by the state's own admission. It was tens of millions of dollars, which would have paid to track every dime of spending at every level of government across this entire great state. That audit was eventually done, and tens of millions of dollars worth of fraudulent payments were carved out of the system. Is it back? Probably.
Online question real quick.
Can you please spell out to Illinois taxpayers what exactly they must do to avoid being bankrupt by the Pritzker, Edgars, and 1 through, it says 10K teachers.
The political class knows how to run an election, right? I mean, there's ironclad control of the political class on the entire election process. You saw it again in the last election. Here's what the politicians cannot control. They can't control you and I exercising the rights we already have under the law right here as the owners, as the bosses. Let me explain what I mean. If you come to openthebooks.com and if you find an expenditure that you question, you only have to ask one question. Mr. Public Official, where in the law do you get the power to make the expenditure? That's one question that a pair of watchdogs from downstate, literally in the middle of nowhere, they're called the Edgar County Watchdogs, Kirk Allen and John Kraft. They live in a county of 18,000 people. They're 2 hours from the nearest airport. They're an hour and a half away from the nearest dry cleaner. And by asking that one question and aggressively, persistently following up, nearly 400 local and elected officials in this state have fled in the face of that question. That's what you and I can do. The political class, they cannot justify their tax and spend decisions. If you hold them to existing law, they flee their post. It's where in the law do you have the power to make that expenditure? It's called Dillon's Rule, and you can Google that for the exact definition.
Okay, real quick, so everybody knows what we're doing. We have the gentleman back here, then we have Jameson, then Mark and Vic, and then Susan will have the last question. Oh, the gentleman back here, sorry. Then Susan will have the last question. So.
Thank you. Adam, I just wanted to say congratulations. I had the great benefit and honor of being in the delivery room when OpenTheBooks.com was born, along there with Hillary and Noel and Bruno and others, and you've done amazing, amazing work. So my question is, when I make out the check, is it to American Transparency or is it to Open the Books?
So we have a DBA on OpenTheBooks.com, but our organization is officially titled American Transparency and is an IRS-recognized 501c3 public charity. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for your support over many, many years. We would not be here, and we could not do this without your support and many other good people like you across the entire country. Thank you very much, and thanks for running our payroll at Precision Payroll of America. When we had one employee, we started with them, and now they're running a payroll at 3035 for us.
Okay, Jameson.
Okay. Adam, I really appreciate that you are unfortunately too rare in public policy debate are really using per family, per household expenditures. Your answer to the lady from Hinsdale, $1,000 a year, is something that everybody can understand. They can't understand 40 million or 160 million. But what I wanted to ask is, following Milton Friedman's rule, that the way to get laws passed is to have the wrong people vote the right way. Have you used Barack Obama as a co-sponsor of this of the legislation, with the press saying Barack Obama wants you to do this? You might want to try that out with some reporters.
Well, we're going to need to use that with Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker right now, in control of all of those committees. Look, I think these things transcend party. In Washington D.C., it is the party of one. I mean, with Paul Ryan as Speaker, Paul Ryan, with all appropriations starting in the House, he put Obama-era spending on steroids, and Paul Ryan greenlit $300 billion in additional discretionary spending. That's above and beyond any entitlement program. $300 billion of discretionary spending over the course of the last 2 fiscal years. So we have to be making arguments to left, right, and center. And I think that our honorary chairman, alongside Barack Obama, they've pioneered that to show that it can be done.
Come back here.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you lost for governor in 2010 because you're doing a heck of a job, better than doing what you're doing now. I want to go back to the Hinsdale situation. I'm a real estate agent. I have a listing there. And I can tell you that property taxes are killing values totally. And we first got hit with the Sterigenics fraud hoax that killed deals. But they're putting a gun to the taxpayers' head saying, well, you're not going to have football, swimming, wrestling, marching band, things like that. Those are big deals for families. And I can tell you that people are moving to go to play for a certain football team. Lyons Township, LT High School, is just salivating over the possible talent from Hinsdale. And your average taxpayer is not going to know what to do. They want their kid to play football next year and swimming and all that. I understand that this is not needed, but what are they supposed to do when these school board members are making these huge decisions that affect their lives? And right now it's put all kinds of medium, Hinsdale's high property values, but it's put a lot of listings in limbo because people don't know what to do. I've experienced that personally. Well, we're not going to do anything for the time being until this is sorted out.
So I think, if boards are unresponsive, when you go to the ballot box to vote on these referendums, you have to vote no until they get responsive. You have to run a slate of candidates against these boards to create accountability. So let's talk about how this went down in Hinsdale. So as soon as petitions for the consolidated elections in April closed, our board rolled out this new referendum and brought the heat to football, swimming, cheerleading, and National Honor Society. They're smart about it. They insulate themselves from ballot box challenges. So we have to put in place like-minded citizens, family, our neighbors, watchdog organizations locally to be able to hold them accountable. Folks that have long memories, that can fight these policy battles, that can go door to door. It's a lot of work. Otherwise, the other side is incentivized through the profit mechanism. And look, the teachers union's all for this referendum because what they're going to do is it'll take the pressure off the budget that right now goes towards construction and safety and maintenance, and that'll free all of that up to continue to pay these six-figure public employees even more money. So you've got the entire spending complex in the local school district on the same side of the trade.
We're going to come down here for the two questions. One thing to follow up real quick. I don't know if you Oak Park. There's a story getting ready to come out there about one of the union officials. This was not working. It was giving me other feedback. One of the union officials is actually running for the school board. She's a teacher in the district, an NEA official, and she's now running for the school board there as well. So that it makes it, yeah, it does add up to makes it really, really difficult. So.
She wants to be her own boss.
Yep.
All right, Mark Weiermiller, thanks for coming tonight. Nutrier just spent $82 million on a lunchroom, so you guys are not unique. So on the pensions, we could talk about school spending all day, but on the pensions. So I first heard about the pensions with the late Jack Roser, who wrote a book, The Pension Scam. I talk about it all the time. So my question is, why can't we focus more on new employees going IRAs, 401ks, and get away and start phasing out where we really push this with labor negotiations and there's no new pensions? Why can't we do that?
Because you need political power in order to do that. And right now, obviously, that folks that believe that should be the policy, they're not in power. Here's the other reason that would put ideas like this on the table. Since 2010, and we've been right about this, we've advocated hard caps on property taxes. Now, it's not draconian. It forces a public body, a school district, to live under the same rules that we all live at home. Basically, last year's budget, you could make it a little more flexible, plus cost of living inflation. Make it even more flexible. You can go and persuade the voters to vote more money above the caps on referendum. Then you're persuading rather than coercing. But if you have hard caps on property taxes, then a public body can only spend, they can only give last year's salaries plus inflation, if any. They can only confer, paid time off benefits and extra perquisites and extra benefits that fit under the entire property tax cap. It forces fiscal discipline down. So if you had hard caps on property taxes, all of a sudden you would get momentum for ideas that limit these excessive and egregious public pensions. And you would get ideas like 401ks gainfully on the table with a mix of other ideas to hold the spending under the cap. So we need hard caps on property taxes. It's a bipartisan idea. I mean, I don't care if you're a progressive or a libertarian. Everybody is feeling like they're renting their home from their local school district. You may own title, but you're paying a monthly rent payment to live in your own home to your local school district. I'm paying $2,500 of rent every single month to my local school district. That's more than I ever paid in the city of Chicago to rent an apartment right on Lincoln Park Zoo, first position on the lake. This is outrageous. And what it is, if you think about it, it's socialism. Yeah, you own your house. You have title. But you're paying rent to your public body.
Hi, thank you. I had a question. I was going to ask it, and then you made a mention of something, the Capital Research Center, and they're going to come out with some kind of report like grant money or expenditures on like nonprofits or anything. What I was going to ask you is, has your organization done anything and exposed anything like shady groups getting like grants or government money? Like, I'm thinking of an example like Acorn, for example, back in the day. Were there ever organizations, or let's say agitators, community organizers, protest groups that were getting money that's like they shouldn't be getting?
Well, it's a great question, Victor, and I appreciate it. Yes, we have. Brookings Institution. So on the right, you have the Heritage Foundation. On the left, you've got Brookings. So we took a look at the federal checkbook and Brookings Institution last year, and here's what we found. We found that during the Obama years, the signature progressive liberal think tank in Washington, D.C., the Brookings Institution, received $20 million from 50 separate federal agencies over that 8-year period. They even had contracts with the Office of the White House. Obama himself, as president, was contracting with the Brookings Institution, supposedly the watchdog of the left, to train White House employees. Brookings didn't need taxpayer money. Their annual revenues exceed $100 million a year. There are nonprofit organizations in this country that nearly are 100% funded by government. Actually, there's been a concerted effort on the center left, too often times with support from the right, to fund organizations like all the healthcare exchanges under Obamacare, and then those healthcare exchanges funded with hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money were to be spun off into nonprofit organizations. Here's why that's important. Once it's a nonprofit, I can't file a Freedom of Information Act request with them. I have no control. I can't vote out a new board. They're unresponsive to elections. This is called permanent governance that you can't change even if you vote the bums out. So there's a lot of work to be done at every level. But a lot of these nonprofits are nearly 100% on their revenues funded by taxpayers, and that's what this report at the Capitol Research Center will expose.
Final question over here with Susan.
Okay, I have a comment and a question. Talking about bonuses, I retired from the Food and Drug Administration 3 years ago. And when I saw that they were bringing back inspectors so that they could insure us, because according to FSMA, they only
agencies trust $8,000. The biggest bonus in the entire system in the year 2016 went to the human resource manager. He's the guy that cuts the payroll checks. He got a bonus off his own check that was higher than any in the entire system out of 2 million federal workers. So this is why we need transparency. I wanted Congress to hold hearings on the Presidio Trust, and they never did.
Let's give Adam a round of applause. And I've got a couple more things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great questions. Great to be here with you.
I know Adam has some stuff on the back table. Please feel free to pick that up. There's some more yellow scarves, which I understand from the weather you're going to need in the next few days and next week. So want to make sure you're picking all that stuff up. I want to thank everybody for coming. Remind you, if you want some Heartland materials, there's some in the back here. Feel free to pick them up. Take them to your friends and neighbors. And I want to watch your emails. We have some upcoming events that you're really going to like. I don't have the date set yet for all of them. The next one is going to be on stopping socialism. I don't know the date yet, so watch your emails. And then I do know on March 26th, David Keene will be here, former NRA president. He will be speaking here at an event before he goes down to iGold. So you want to make sure you start watching your emails and everything like that. Real quick, I know Joe's over here hiding, but Joe and Diane came in a little while ago. They've been retired and kind of relaxing and stuff, but Joe and Diane, give them a big hand for all they did here at Heartland Institute. Again, pick up a flyer, think about the other school choice events coming up. I do want to apologize to the people online. You probably had a hard time hearing some from our technical difficulties. Sorry about that, but Thank you all for coming, and y'all have a great night.